rolling in here. I'm Brian Dolan. I'm the CEO and founder of WorkReduce. We are excited to have an all-star cast of characters up on screen today for a discussion about the future of training, the future of learning, and also, I think, an ongoing discussion about general industry shenanigans, which has been our theme in the tweets that we've had going back and forth about today's webinar. So really excited everybody could join us. I've saved my last press shirt for this webinar. This is the second in our series so far, and we're hoping to continue these. It's been a really much more cost-effective way for us to reach some of the people we like to stay in touch with, as opposed to some of the in-person events that we had planned in New York. So not sure when I'm getting back to Manhattan, and this is a great way, though, to be in touch, with everybody. So I am joined today by a group of folks who I'll introduce now, and then I'm going to turn things over to Anna Milicevic to moderate. So going across my screen, we've got Maja Milicevic, who is a partner and along with Onus, one of the co-founders of Sparrow Advisors, which is a management consulting firm that for the past 5 years has helped brands, media companies, agencies, figure out sustainable distributed practices. Great to have these guys joining from right down the street in Somerville, Massachusetts. We've got Shiv Gupta, the founder of U of Digital, which is a consultancy focused on training people in the digital landscape. We've got Kane. Chris is the founder of Jounce Media, which is a data-driven startup helping their customers exploit market inefficiencies, of which we know there are many in this marketplace. And then we've got Griffin. Rob is a longtime veteran of Havas and currently a leader at Business Online, where he's leading a programmatic strategy there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna Milicevic, and Anna's going to lead this team through some questions, and I'll be jumping in with some occasional wise-ass commentary. And with that, over to you, Anna.
Hey everyone, it's good to see so many familiar faces. I'm glad we all made it to the Zoom. And I, for one, am really, really interested in what happens next week when Brian runs out of fresh pressed shirts. So that'll be an interesting sartorial problem. Sure.
I break out the iron, that's what happens. It's not the first time, yes. Won't be the last, or not the last time.
So you're going to be, you're going to be the captain of industry shenanigans today. So folks, we're so weeks into a variety of shelter-in-place orders, depending on where you live. It might be week 6, it might be week 8. You may have completely lost count of what weeks are, or days, or whatever, however we used to mark time. In advertising and marketing, we're generally amongst the luckier folks because we do get to do a lot of our work from home. So we're not out there on the front lines. We're relatively safe in our homes. And even if that hasn't been the practice for companies before this, you're now kind of all in this together. At the same time, we're not exactly safe because we have been impacted by very, very aggressively commercially. So many of us are facing uncertainty, reduced spend, furloughs, and in many cases, layoffs. So that scenario, professional development seems to fall very low on the hierarchy of importance. So I'm really curious to hear from all of you how we should approach training and leadership development in these kinds of circumstances. Not everybody at once. Shiv, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So, I think as you outlined, it's a tough time. What we're seeing from some of our customers, when we solely focus on education. And so what we're actually seeing from some of our customers in this space is they're actually leaning into training a lot right now because it's an opportunity when everyone's sitting at home and you know, productivity is lower. You know, how do you kind of increase that productivity? And it's education, it's, you know, running more live or remote workshops and things of that nature. So I think some really smart strategic leadership teams and organizations are actually taking this as an opportunity to lean in and increase productivity. So I think that's just one theme that we're seeing. I think on the flip side, you know, to your point, one of the first things that gets cut in, you know, an economic downturn is L&D investment. And so, you know, we're seeing that as well. And I think, you know, there's a dichotomy there of approaches. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. I understand why L&D gets cut, but it's interesting to see some of these organizations kind of zig while, you know, others are zagging.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, I think that's a great point. But like, you know, so for where we sit, we mainly focus on executive education and really creating these spaces where senior leaders can come and ask questions they wouldn't necessarily be able to ask their teams. So something along the lines of like, hey, I don't understand, you know, why this particular vendor is better or there are other, or, you know, why SPO is important, for example, right? Like, can you explain it to me? So where we focus outside of the realm of like most traditional training setups that we've seen in the industry are, it tend to be more geared toward junior and mid-level staff. But you know, we've also built those type of industry-wide certifications that are geared to mid-levels across the board. And some of the things that we've observed exactly is like, you know, Shiv, to your point, that really training seems to be the first budget to get. And you know, but we look at it almost like as a self-inflicted injury, where, you know, as teams that have training gaps continue to have them and keep digging into lower levels of resilience and don't really have adaptability to figure out these new changing circumstances. The other thing that we're seeing as well is that, you know, like professional development used to be seen as something a company provides. And I think in this crisis, this could be an opportunity for individuals to understand what they really need to beef up on and think about how they can enrich their knowledge and think of what they should be doing in terms of, you know, a different push versus pull strategy here. And I think the other thing to add on this as well is that one of the things that we see is that this expectation that because we are all working from home, there is, you know, this idea of new time available to everybody, that the expectation is that everybody's going to come out of this with like 20 new skills and certifications and things. And I think it's important to really put that in a reality check and really understand how, you know, a lot of people who have to balance kids who are out of school, a whole bunch of other things, maybe they're directly impacted by this health crisis, etc. Like, I think we need to have a better understanding of what the realities of what we can expect coming out of here when it comes to training.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little
You
bit before.
may have seen a poll pop up on your screen. So sorry, Rob, I am passing the ball to you. And I wanted to say, so this looks a little bit different depending on what side of the industry you're on. It's a very different approach to training in agencies than it is at brands, than it is at technology companies. So Rob, like most of us, you've worn multiple hats, but you've worn a very, very big hat at Havas at a large agency for a long time. Can you give us that perspective and tie it to what you're doing today, and then we'll pivot to Chris?
Yeah, my big point to hammer on this, as we talked about sort of in the prep call, is yeah, there's a lot of stuff organizations can provide and a lot of stuff organizations can offer, even large organizations in particular. You know, startups, smaller companies, that development, you know, it can be slightly different animal. And even in the bigger companies, when there is one, you know, all too often it's too easy that, yeah, there's certifications and different things that I have to take. But a lot of times, you know, and I think today's day and age is sort of changing those rules now, you know, that, you know, now that a lot of what used to be an live event is moving to a Zoom environment, I think that's up in the game for a lot of online certifications. Because even at a big company, the problem you had in the past is, all right, I want you to learn these new skills and I'm going to help you develop your career. Go take these Google certifications. Well, I load it on the screen and I hit play and I go off and I go do whatever it is I feel like doing. And when it pings, I come back and I guess my way through a 4 or 5 multiple choice scenario questions. Even if I get them wrong, it lets me keep trying it until I get it right. Well, it's only 80 Ds, so I only need 4 tries per question. It's 5 questions assuming I get them all wrong. Now I've got my certifications, but now because a lot of that, because of this technology and a lot of offline events that are moving into sort of Zoom streamed environments, I think that's forcing people to be in front of a screen and interact more. And then across that entire spectrum, though, it's my opinion in a lot of all of this, that onus of development should really sort of the genesis and the origination of that should really come from all the individual employees. For everybody I talk to at a large organization that they're not used to working from home, they're at a big company, the big company's got other bigger problems to worry about, their stock price, the economy, bigger things that a lot of people, they don't know what to do with themselves. But so for every one of those people I talk to somebody else that's on a furlough. Maybe they got another consulting job. Maybe like myself, you just started a brand new job and you feel like you're just getting shot out of a cannon every day. And it's some sort of semblance of like a comical version, like, digital advertising version of Groundhog Day, that you sort of get up early, like kids, their Zooms, my wife works, and I'm juggling work through all this. And then it's like food, clean, back to work. And so, and then next thing you know, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. You're like, holy crap, I got to go to bed. And then you sort of do it all over again. So I feel like there's a lot of people that there's a stress of like, they feel like they're like working even more, but for a lot less, because there's been a reconciliation, I think, coming out of a lot of this in the market and what people are getting paid for their time. But I think a lot of it really comes out of that person. Even at a big company like Havas, there's a lot of certifications you can take and that are offered that may or may not be helpful for you. And some of those certifications, depending on where this all shakes out, 6 to 18 months down the road, those roles might not even exist in the organization anymore. So I think the onus is on that person to find the right ones to go after. And if you're not at a big company that has these things, now's the time to stop making the excuses that you have too many sort of office meetings and too many useless meetings to attend to and planning meetings to attend that webinar or read that book or read that article or reach out to somebody you haven't reached out to, participate in forums, like get on advisory boards, be part of the industry associations and be part of things like this. And to me, that all sort of stops, regardless of where you are in that spectrum, sort of a lot of this should come out of the user and the person to drive sort of what they need. And now's the time to do it, in my opinion. So.
All right. I think very similar to what Maja and Shiv were saying. Chris, well, where do you stand on this?
I think Rob makes a good point that, in the context of most companies who are pulling back investments for good reason on different sorts of development opportunities for their employees, it does seem like individuals are taking more seriously their own responsibility in up-leveling their skill set. Maybe they're doing that because they have some more time on their hands. Maybe they're doing that because they're looking for a new job. But it's, in a way, a refreshing thing for us to see. We put a lot of free resources out available as just tools to help people understand more about our industry. And there's a pretty marked uptick in just use of those tools. We publish these things that we call little black books that describe how ad tech works. We make some data resources available for free that describe the shape of the programmatic supply landscape. Those have always been popular, but they're more popular now than they used to be. And I think that's a really positive sign. The other thing that we see, which is maybe another window into just people being more self-directed here, is those downloads more and more come from Gmail accounts than corporate accounts. And there's I just think there is this recognition among a lot of people who are feeling very unsure about what the next 6 to 12 months are going to look like, that they need to be taking responsibility for up-leveling themselves, particularly in the context of, employers who just can't make that investment right now.
Well, in some cases too, think about it, I think, Chris, is something area I think about is there's this whole gap of people that I've been talking to that they're not in furlough, they're not laid off, but I'm no longer an employee of the company, but then they're hiring me back as a contractor.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, like I'm doing the same job, but I'm doing it in a new way. And then there's a lot of just even simple home IT infrastructure that if you haven't worked from home for years or ever, and you find yourself in this bucket, there's not the IT guy down the call to set up my email and get the login to Zoom, right? So there's a whole new level of just basic, like it's not just, do you know how to use Google Docs and can you use Excel anymore? There's other sort of skills, some life skills, right? But just how to do the job. A lot of things that are outside of even like my long-term career development, just my short-term development of how to like function and do this. it's really interesting. And I agree, a lot of that's going to come out of free support, personal email addresses, personal devices, right?
I mean, I agree completely. I think it's very interesting, and in many ways, it's a good thing that we're all experiencing remote now together. You know, we're a remote first company, and we're fairly used to operating in a location agnostic, digital first manner. But for a lot of our clients, like we had an anecdote recently that like we had a client that literally had to like order a printer from Best Buy so they could sign a contract, because you know they have to sign by wet ink, whatever that means. So you know, so there's what I find interesting now is that there seems to be a less of a barrier to trying things that would have otherwise be hard to push through. You know, like for example, like a lot of these senior executive workshops that we do in industry landscape, like deep dives, this was always an in-person affair, right? You had to be there in the room, you had to see everybody. And so now we're seeing that that kind of shift and get the interest to do that over Zoom, over email AMAs, or some sort of like, you know, similar expert to demand type products that we weren't able to see before. So I think that's interesting too.
Hey, I just want to add to that, Maja. I think that, you know, from our perspective, we always used to do the same thing, right? We were always trying to run as many trainings as we could in person and live for our audiences. And, you know, with everything that's happening now, we're doing everything remotely. And we're actually seeing really, really strong engagement, right? Because I think the expectation has changed for what people should be doing on a Zoom call, right? Like in the past, if you had a bunch of people in a room and you had a few people on the phone or on Zoom, like the people on Zoom felt like they had a free pass to just turn their video off, not pay attention, not engage. And now everyone's on a level playing field. And so like, I think a really positive impact of this whole situation is that online remote training is just more effective because the expectations have changed, right? It's a new normal. It's a new ball game. And so I would hope that, you know, 12 months out or whatever, maybe 6 months out, when we're all past this, we're all in offices again, for the most part, that we can keep doing remote training and it can be as effective as it has been now. And we kind of don't revert back to the old way of, hey, Zoom training is nah, and then, you know, live training is really what's effective.
I think you're spot on the difference of like, you know, now we all have to be engaged because, you know, we all have to be on video as opposed to just putting somebody in the background and listening to that and like just so you can get a check mark at the end of the day and say, hey, I've been through this training. What we found interesting that like, you know, when you design a training to be carried out in person, it doesn't just automatically work very well over video or over Zoom or anything like that. So I think we're going to see a lot of shifts there and trying to figure out how to really tailor what should have been an in-person one to a Zoom training, especially when, you know, we have polls, we have all sorts of things like that. But we had, for example, we developed the Data 360 training for the IAB, and we delivered both the online version and the in-person version. And depending on which version it was, we would be focusing on different formats and adjusting the circumstances. And I think now with the Zoom world, maybe that, you know, we're not going to have two completely different approaches, basically, for online versus in person.
There is some degree here of just sort of like.
All right, Chris, you guys are skating a little bit ahead of my questions. I'll just ask it now and then let you all skate back towards it. And you know, one of the things that I think we all agree on is that it's almost good that everybody's experiencing this all at the same time. As good as a bad situation can be. So given that we don't know how long this is going to last and we don't really know the overall impact it's going to have on the industry, things seem pretty dire right now, but who knows? What do you think is going to be the future of training? I think Shiv and Maja have put us already in that territory of, well, maybe it's not so in person as it used to be before. Maybe there's a lot that we can do in remote first scenarios. So what do you see as the next few steps moving on from there?
You know what? One thing I'll throw out there for everybody, I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but I think one thing that'll be interesting is, you know, what aspects and functionality of learning, development, or even holding meetings and having a panel event like this, and how we interact with the audience, both as presenters, educators, speakers, trainers, right? What does that engaging, interactive, enhanced, augmented experience look like? I could very easily see that, when we go back to even the people that I'm doing, because I do a lot of training myself in a lot of universities, and, I've done sort of performance digital marketing and programmatic media classes like live at a university. I've done them in pre-recorded class structures where the university records it and it sits on an archive and people like take the 2-hour presentation of me broken into 30-minute chapters. Why somebody would want to watch me for 2 hours on a pre-recorded screen baffles me anyways, but that's a separate conversation. And then I've done one where I'm presenting and on the screen I can see the video of all the students and people can text in info. And I think as a trainer, even if I'm doing it live, to have everybody following along on a device and allowing them to ping me questions that I can respond to the group with, because I found in the online environment, even I can see people's faces just like it was live, and I can sort of call out people when I see like I'm losing somebody. And if I see I'm losing somebody, I can ask an open-ended question that people can then submit their questions in more anonymously, so they're not raising their hand in front of all their peers. And I've actually had very engaging dialogues where they're listening to me live, they're texting me a question that I'm repeating for everybody else and then answering it and having a conversation about it. That I could see things like that translating really well to like a live environment. And
speaking of which, our
like that we've never
Q&A
used before, right?
Our Q&A is open on this, and we do have the poll results, which show that of the 75% of the people who've responded so far, we've got about 50% out of the tech sector, 40% out of the agency sector, or the remaining 10 from the brand. And if anybody does have questions that they want to put, which we'll let Maja filter, throw that in the Q&A, and we'll be able to take a quick look and keep this as interactive as Rob is describing there.
Chris, let's go back to you.
Sorry, I muted myself. I was going to say that was my only point, so please, somebody else go before I hijack the mic.
Said Rob, hijacking the mic.
So there is this thing in the current environment I think Rob was getting at. There's just a lot of forced experimentation. And these are experiments that we all would have had to do eventually anyway, but we're just doing them a lot faster than we used to. And we're trying things like this. There are other webinars. There's industry conferences that are now going to be held virtually. Some of them are going to be a real success and some of them are going to be a disaster, but we will just learn much, much faster as an industry how to engage remotely. And I've even, we can even see differences in just day-to-day interactions with our clients. There are clients that we've had for years where we always just pick up the phone and now we're on video. And it's just this much more, it's just changed the whole relationship. There's just these new norms that start to emerge. And so it feels to me like things that would have otherwise taken maybe 5 years to evolve will just become a new norm within a shorter period of time. I'll give you one other example. I was talking to someone who's in recruiting, and that her company has this sort of normal cadence of going to different universities to do recruiting events, which is not a possibility right now. And so they held a virtual one, and she said, we will never go to a college campus again. That was so much more effective. We got such a bigger turnout. It was so much easier to engage with everybody. And that one happened to be a success and something else won't work. But it's just another example of this sort of forced experimentation that I think will just accelerate some changes that would have eventually happened anyway.
That's a really good point. And I think that accelerated timeline and the natural tendency to experiment more is something that we're feel for a really, really long time. So on that note, how do you figure out what's working and what isn't right now? Like if you've just tried a new format, how much time do you give to evaluate whether it worked and what the inputs that you're using to kind of go, oh, this is how I want to keep doing my training curriculum on?
I can start on that one. So we do a bunch of, we collect feedback in a bunch of different ways. So one is obviously just like being there, being present, kind of seeing how the group is reacting, how much engagement you're getting out of the group. So some of the just organic things that you get out of being present. But also, we have surveys that we send out afterwards, just kind of checking on people's feedback and how we can do things better and things of that nature. And so I think like all of the data that you can get out of these workshops is helpful. I think the biggest thing that's valuable, right, is the engagement, right? And it's kind of like the NPS that you get from the surveys, like, hey, would I take something like this again? Would I recommend this to somebody else? Is this useful or valuable to me? And I think it's not great to dwell, right, on like, hey, this didn't go well, and so I don't think this can be successful. I think the key is, to Chris's point, like we're forcing innovation right now, and that's a macro thing, but that's also a micro thing for each company, each person, each workshop, each class, right, and each kind of program. And so kind of forcing yourself into that mindset of, hey, we got to move quickly. We're going to iterate from workshop to workshop. We're not going to kind of get stuck in our ways because we have to be nimble in order to make this whole thing work. So that's kind of the approach that we've been taking in terms of just getting better.
Mm-hmm. That's very all-encompassing. I actually want to throw in a question that we just got from the floor in the spirit of interactivity. So Olivia Mitrowitz, sorry if I've mispronounced your name or last name, she was wondering if we have any thoughts on charging for virtual product training during COVID times. Her company has a lot of free on videos. However, customers would like in-person or live virtual training offered for free. And that's really not, because their budgets are being cut. So that whole free training versus paid training, I think, is an interesting discussion to have. So maybe, Chris, you were mentioning an increase in downloads of your free assets. Maybe you start, and then we go Rob, Maja, Shiv.
Sure. It's tough because what winds up happening is companies who are some mixture of very well-resourced and have some other revenue stream are very happy to give away high quality resources for free. That's been happening forever, but it's happening more now. You can see more of the big platforms, tech companies, media companies, offering free trainings. And that could be in the form of, content that you download, or live webinars, or on-demand sessions, or even formal certification programs. They're just free. And it just does make it tricky to monetize content, especially if that content is sort of one-to-many. The space that I think still does exist for being able to monetize, remote learning is anything that is, highly tailored, particularly if it's in an environment where the participants can have, more candid discussions. Maja, I think you were touching on this earlier. Executive education sessions, like that's not going to work in a on-demand video session. They need, those executives are expecting you to be able to spend some time with them wrestling with big strategic choices. Mm-hmm. From our perspective, that's the thing that is, monetizable. But sort of the off-the-shelf standardized trainings, it's always been a little challenging to clarify to a potential customer why that's something that's worth paying for when, say, Google has training programs for free. There are good reasons, but it's always been a little tricky to describe that. It is more tricky now in the current economic environment.
Yeah, and I agree. That's really like the way we look at it. We look at it from almost like a layer approach, right? So there's a lot of the base layer, general industry knowledge type education out there that is put together by individual platforms, vendors, or somebody like that. And I think that's a great place to start and really figure out, the basics of the basics. But the caveat there is really that everybody coming up with this training is really looking at it from only one small perspective, right? So like if you're looking at Google training, they're just there to explain to you why they're the best and why you need to really think about it. So it's not really something that you can use to help your business holistically, but definitely a good base layer to include and really look at, to be able to even figure out what are these more specific things to look at and where to invest further. So Chris, for example, like one of the things, like, we're doing these like flexible curriculums almost, where the executives are incentivized to take a more active role in these training plans, right? Like it's partly because the trainings are really tailored to them, to a specific company or a specific role within a specific company. But we're also, as part of this whole COVID universe, we're now trialing a hybrid coaching / AMA practice with type of a regular structured feedback that managers can use to ensure people on their team are getting the right guidance. You know, so far that's the type of things that like we've seen really good results at from the early days. But yeah, I think that's something, you know, I'm looking at it from the building blocks and like what is the base layer structure that you can probably access for free, and having in mind that this is something that is produced by a specific company from a specific viewpoint, and then really figuring out what are those, what is the next level that you would need to invest in, either as a company or as an individual, to really prepare you for, you know, what the changing world.
I'm just giving it all away for free for now. You know, I figure let's just do this stuff, you know, give as much away as we can for a while, see what comes back when things start to stabilize. You know, I hope it works. We're going to find out, you know, because certainly a lot of people do have, you know, budgets that have been cut way back right now, and it's hard for them to, you know, to find ways to spend. So I think, Olivia, that's a really good question to ask, right? I think for a lot of us who are smaller companies, you know, this is a time where we've got to take some risks, you know, hope that our, you know, our PPP loans and our solid, you know, our most solid customers really kind of carry us through, you know, what's going to be a tough time, and you really establish some goodwill, you know, now while we can, and you know, wait for the advertising budgets to return.
For me, I love all the free and readily available conversations, including this one, but I think that it sets up an interesting precedent, which is this expectation that training materials are widely available and hence really not valued as much as they should be. And so, you know, if we look back at what Chris said about an increase in signups of you know, Gmail accounts and non-corporate accounts, and what Rob was saying earlier about just kind of tuning in to click a checkbox on some you know, employee engagement tool and not actually actively participating in training. I think the trainings where you do feel like you're getting a lot of value are the ones that people will pay for. And that really depends on the type of training, the relationship you have with your company, et cetera. But I would be really curious about how companies who are just expecting that their staff be trained for free because times are tough. Like, that to me does not sound like a very good place to work, even on the good days. But I'm gonna get off the soapbox and turn the mic over to Rob and Shiv to weigh in on Olivia's question about virtual product training and the free versus paid dichotomy.
Yeah, my take on it, right, is people, there's always been a line of, you know, what I'm willing to pay for, what I'm not willing to pay for, right? It's always been there. You know, the challenge with right now is where is that line? I'm not sure yet. You know, as we sort of, you know, digital transformation became digital now, right, and became everybody's instantaneous sole menu item on the agenda, you know, for in many cases, you know, maybe where that line used to be is going up now, because more and more people are pushing to automation because they have to and they don't have a choice. So like, as Kristen was saying, things that might take 5 years is now going to happen in a matter of months. So maybe where that bar is going to go up a little bit. But to me, at the end of the day, you know, Google's offered free training using search as an example for years, right? And how many agencies have gone out, hired somebody young and had them take the free training only to screw their master account to hell and then have to go hire a proper agency to come in and clean it all up and make it right again? Or how many brands have brought something in-house because they hired a couple of people that talked a good game because they took some free programmatic training from the Trade Desk or Media Math, you know? And so it doesn't always go that smooth, right? So I think the question is thinking about the training that you're offering and where is that line of what do I expect for free based on what's available in market. You know, it's sort of like, I feel like what I'm willing to pay for in training is sort of like watching sports trade values of players. It comes and goes depending on the circumstantial situation and sort of what I need versus what everybody else is going at, right? So everybody else starts going higher, my trade value is going up. And if that goes down, same thing happens. And I think the same thing in this case, that if more and more stuff is being pushed to automation and a lot of the training is very, you know, tactical in nature, right? You know, Google has OptiScore and a whole bunch of automated features and functionality that can do a lot of that work now. So if that's the level of training, there's other stuff like that available for free. So they're probably just looking for as much as possible at a more sort of entry level. At some point, there's going to be training that's a lot more sophisticated, whether it's one-to-many or one-to-one, further up that value chain. I think there's still going to be a bucket of one-to-many training that I think people will pay for. But what price, that again still remains to be varied. So there's a couple variables that are kind of causing change here. But I think that the old adage of like certain stuff I expect for free and where is that line of where, and then there's more value I'm going to pay for it, that still holds. It just, I think the question mark is like, where is that line at the moment?
So the super premium trainings right now are how to schedule your spouses, your kids, and your own Zooms, and how to make sure
my
that like,
9-year-old
your
daughter
network
is for
doesn't fail.
hire. If anybody on this call needs Zoom training, she has become the queen of Zoom, to the point now she storms in meetings to make sure I have my Zoom calls set up okay. And I'm like, listen, 9-year-old little girl, I don't need your help. Thank you. I know you think you're all that, but because you know how to use Zoom now. And she's even got all the key commands down. So if anybody needs training there, I got somebody for you.
I think that's a nice webinar topic.
Zoom, right?
Child labor in the age of remote working.
Oh dear. Shiv, where do you stand?
It's hard to be the last person on a panel answering a question because you guys answered it all so well and like hit everything. So the only thing that pops into my mind that I think is additive to what you guys said is I'll give you guys a little bit of a metaphor. I feel like very few things in life are actually free, right? We all know that. And so you pay in some shape or form for everything. And if I can make an analogy here, it's like the streaming wars, right? It's like subscription video on demand versus advertising supported video on demand, right? And so if you're taking courses through Google or MediaMath or the Trade Desk, that's like, kind of watching some show and having a bunch of commercials in the middle versus, if you're paying somebody for a premium experience, that's kind of like having HBO Now, right? Or Netflix, because you don't have to deal with, hey, you're trying to lead me to something or lead me to buy a product or recommend it to somebody else. So, but yeah, I think you guys nailed it on the head. I don't have anything else to add there.
The risk here is
I
that,
really like
that the quality of training declines, and that you wind up getting, to layer in a maybe bad analogy here, you wind up getting something that looks like the way that the journalism works right now. That high quality journalism is really hard to fund, and that clickbait is easy to fund, and you get a bunch of clickbaity education things. I don't know if there's much evidence that has happened yet, but that is the risk here. That if companies with an agenda put together clickbaity education content that's really just a sales pitch, and that cannibalizes investment in truly quality, impartial education, that you do wind up seeing a downgrade in the actual education of people in the industry over the next year or so.
I love both of your analogies here, and I think they work really well given how close advertising is to the media space anyway. And so I think thinking through that scenario of like which streaming platform you are in any given scenario is a really, really good one. So one interesting thing that may also be accelerated by our current mass acceleration is the underlying trend of in-housing that we've already seen take off pretty aggressively over the last couple of years. So given the split of attendees that we had between tech companies, agencies, and brands, I think this is an interesting topic across the board. But if you're in a brand scenario where you're shifting to in-housing perhaps all of your advertising and marketing operations or some, how can you then consistently ensure that your teams are up to date and have the resources that they need to not fall behind where the industry is going, given that you've naturally selected already a set of tools and solutions that you're using for the foreseeable future?
Before anyone jumps in to answer that, I'll just say that that's been a top concern that I've heard from people who are bringing, marketing in-house. Like, how do I stay up on top of what's going on now that we've selected this platform? Is it still good? Do I have the time to figure this out? And I think it's, with budgets being cut right now, it's increasingly an issue for agencies too. I think agencies already had questions about how they, were staying up on top of keeping my workforce, on the cutting edge of what's going on. staying on top of trends. So I think it's a universal question that's going to accelerate even more with the shift to, hey, we don't go to conferences anymore, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest differences, and even though agencies are still struggling with resources, I think for years now, I think people are starting to see where the holes are in the false promise of in-housing, or not that in-housing can't work, but it's always been in complete conflict of interest of what that team needs to do to be in-house versus why you're bringing it in-house. And you're bringing it in-house to save money. And I've spent years consulting with brands that have done it. I've never been the guy to help the brand bring it in-house. I'm the guy that gets brought in 3 or 4 years later, kind of like a general contractor, right? You buy a house and you sort of stick with the appliances, the roof, and the driveway you got. But the 5-year mark, the domino starts happening, right? Like the dishwasher goes. Well, you go to a dishwasher, you walk into Home Depot. Well, I didn't really plan on it, but for the price of the dishwasher, I can get a stove, microwave, and a refrigerator if I go the same thing. But I didn't measure out for a refrigerator, or maybe one thing goes and then the dominoes start happening. So you need a general contractor to sort of figure everything out more broadly. And the thing I see over and over is you brought it in-house to save money, less than the money you were saving the agency, and the agency already had a resource problem staffing the account against your business. So you made that worse. And so I think there needs to be a cultural mindset shift of, you're bringing it in-house for control of your intellectual property. You want to own your own tech stack. You want to own your own sort of enriched first-party data, and have everything running through your pipes. So the enriched data and the performance insights coming out the other end is your IP, not your agency. And if you save some money along the way, or net, you don't cost any more money, you shouldn't try and peel back further for big savings, because that makes a problem worse. And the advantage the agency has is I work on more than one piece of business in most cases. So therefore, I'm exposed, and there's agency-wide lunch and learns. If you bring that in-house, you have to help the teams stay exposed to other things. And it's not just conferences. The number one mistake I see brands make when they have it in-house is they do an RFP process, they pick a DSP, and then they're going to run with that DSP for the next 3 years. And every DSP that knocks on their door, they're like, I got a DSP, I don't need a meeting with you. It's like, no. You still need to meet with every other DSP in town to make sure you're getting the right thing, to see who's thinking about things differently, to find where that innovation is, to ensure and keep your current DSP honest and make sure you're getting the best rates you can and the best functionality you can, right? You don't just sort of pick one and stop meeting everybody. You got to stay part of the community. And I think that's the biggest mistake. And the agencies, while they still have resource problems given everything currently going on, more often than not, they have the added benefit that by default of their job and the nature of their job, they're more exposed to a broader bandwidth. And when you're an in-house, you don't necessarily have to be. And I think you need to force yourself to be. And in many cases, that requires the employer to empower their people, but it also requires the people to want to go learn, right? I've always said, and I'll leave it here, is that, you can teach somebody to do anything, but you can't teach somebody to be hungry and care. Like, I can't make you give a shit. I can't make you care. I can't make you hungry to learn, but I can teach you anything else. And this sort of to me distills all the way down to that.
And will they pay for the knowledge is the other question. Getting back to the, the audience question we had before, right? It's like, hey, if somebody can distill all this for you, maybe it's Sparrow advisors, right? Maybe it's you, Shiv, like, are people going to pay for it? I think that's a big question. I don't know that they're budgeting for it.
I love all the analogies that y'all are bringing today. And basically, I think it's, everybody wants to buy the car or the house or whatever, but nobody wants to pay taxes and nobody wants to pay maintenance. And that's exactly where things like training budgets tend to fall. Like, it's the thing that nobody enjoys spending on. And we really, really, to Rob's point, need a mindset shift that this is an incredibly valuable resource and not that can be cut. And I'm sorry, Maja, I cut you off. I think you were starting to say something.
I was just gonna pile on the whole DSP universe and how interesting it is so a lot of the things that when we get called, it's things like vendor landscape and making sure that you choose the right vendor. But a lot of times, Rob, exactly, we see this, like, somebody has chosen a DSP, and it's usually like in some opaque process. Nobody's really sure how, just a DSP appears. And, nobody's really looked at, does this make sense across multiple formats? Does it make sense for your organization? Does it make sense for your region? Does it make sense for any of these things? Has that DSP been acquired recently? Do they have some sort of a different different type of a corporate governance that since you've chosen last. But then you see companies, especially just like double down on this choice of, in this case, DSP or really any other vendor, and like
Does it help me with my
around
TikTok strategy?
Right, yes, absolutely. and we see that, like, so it's a very big missed opportunity to really understand the landscape and figure out how to properly invest in such a big project like in-housing, so you can really figure out what are the things that you need to own the IP to internally, make sure that your teams are trained on, and then really map how different technologies can really help you achieve that overall business excellence, right? As opposed to starting with the, hey, I've chosen a DSP or whatever, whatever else you were talking about, and then everything else needs to fall in line with the technology I've chosen, and I'm just sticking to it forever and ever. So yeah, that's my big, as Rob was talking about it, I'm like, oh God, you're like literally retelling at least 50 of my recent conversations.
Maja has some
inner channel there.
DSP PTSD. Okay.
So I was going to cut this whole thing off at 45 minutes, but we can keep going if you guys want. I think this is a great conversation and I'm really enjoying it. What do you guys think? You want to take it to the top of the hour?
I'll add at one point on the DSP thing, or the in-house marketer thing. Almost all of our clients are in-house marketing teams who are either far along in that process or maybe just starting. And I think what some combination of Maja and Rob outlined represents accurately the way that many of those clients operate. What is maybe more encouraging, though, is one of the scariest things, one of the most real risks of bringing media buying, particularly programmatic media buying, in-house, is that you find yourself left on an island after some period of time. So you do the whole vendor evaluation thing, you design your org structure, you onboard new employees, and then it just sort of fades over time. And that's especially true for marketers that that aren't located in a major city, which is most of them. It's just really easy to feel like you're out there kind of guessing and sort of feeling your way through the trees without a whole community of people or an agency to sort of give you some gut checks on what's working and what's not and how's the industry evolving. That's getting better because it doesn't matter so much if you're based in New York City or San Francisco or Columbus or Austin or suburban New Jersey at the moment. It's sort of all the same. And access to peers and access to information and industry events for those parts of our ecosystem has actually gotten better now that everything's virtual.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yep. All right. I was going to say to that, I think another area that I think a lot of teams that are in-house that are trying to struggle with training and development is, ironically enough, I feel like a lot of them are ex-agency people, and they've forgotten a little bit of sort of some of their scrappy agency tricks of, if you're an in-house team, you're doing media buys, depending on the partner, there's often varying degrees of managed services and outsourced services that sort of come bundled sort of with that media. And on the agency side, anytime a client would call and ask me something I didn't have an answer to, I told them we were an expert on it, and I'd call the publisher that would benefit the most from me getting good at that skill and be like, I need everything you got. I need to become an instantaneous expert on purple poopy peanuts. Educate me, go. And then I'm going to go sell that, right, to the client. But then they go, it's like client side, and you have this mix of partners. You have a DSP, you have a data partner, you have a retargeting partner, maybe a prospecting partner. And even though there's not an agency involved, I think they sort of put them on an order ticket line cook relationship, right? Like I said, dude, don't tell me you got chicken fingers. I told you all I wanted was, burger with bacon and fries, right? I remember years ago, I saw a cartoon sort of comic. I'll have to dig it up. I thought it was really good. And it's a hand-drawn, black and white cartoon. And it's a wall of medieval soldiers with shields and shields. And then there's the king's tent and the king, and he's got his sword and he's got his couple lieutenants and he's waving his hand, and the caption's I don't have time to talk to some crazy salesperson. I got a war to go win. Meanwhile, the salesperson behind him has a Gatling gun, mounted on the ground with the chain of bullets coming out. He's like, I don't have time for that. And I think agency side, they'd go find that guy with the Gatling gun and then turn around and make it their own, right? Even whether it was or wasn't so relevant, they would solve that problem. And I think sometimes when they get in-house, they stop like problem solving in that unique way. Like you got a ton of vendors you're pumping money into, like use them more. Like call them and be like, I'm having a challenge with this. I need to become smart at this. Most of these companies, particularly right now more than ever, like if they're not on the getting canceled list, they gladly puke whatever they have at you, like to keep their business, right? So like use that. Like it's just, to me, it's just such an untapped resource that I see in-house teams not leverage as much as I feel like they should.
Yeah. Hey, Rob, I just want to add to that real quick. So I'm going to maybe like tying a bow on this whole topic. Like I couldn't agree more. I think that, our philosophy when we started U of Digital was we wanted to train the vendor side. So we focus primarily on training up sales teams at vendors. And part of the reason we do that is because we want, one of our missions is to like make this industry better, right? Through education. And how are we going to do that? Well, we have to empower and educate the technologists, right? We have to empower and educate where the whole thing starts, which is the products, the technology, the DSPs, the SSPs, right? And like those are the people that are building this industry. And if they're not out there talking to agency partners, talking to marketers direct about how all this stuff works, right? And how, their product fits within the context of the larger landscape, well, then the entire industry suffers, right? So to your point, Rob, I think marketers that are in-housing need to view those vendors as an educational resource more than ever, especially when they don't have an agency in play anymore. That the agency was kind of serving that purpose before.
Yeah, I love it. I think the last point I'll make before I hand it back to Brian to wrap us up for today is I think that's the right approach, and I love that notion of relying more on your technology partners. But the challenge that we've seen with our clients is that their technology partners are actually incentivized just to hype their own technology. Instead of, so if you're working with a particular DSP, we've used that example, they're incentivized to trash all of the other DSPs instead of actually talking about your challenges and things that are specific to your company.
I want to jump in on that one right there real quick, though.
Jump in.
Something that's a hot topic to me that drives me batty sometimes. It's like the same person will go agency side to client side to build up the in-house client team. When they're on the agency side, they have no qualms about being an asshole. Mm-hmm. Like if somebody comes in for an educational lunch and learn and they start selling, they will call bullshit so goddamn fast that the sales guy's head's going to spin when the room evacuates, right? So then they go brand side and they give the technology provider no advanced feedback. They give them no advanced intel in many cases. And then they come in and just do a crappy sales job. And it's like, well, did you ask to preview the deck before they came in? Did you give them any information? Okay, you don't got to be like the asshole agency, stereotypical like person, right? From a Saturday Night Live skit or something, but you could be a little more forthright and demanding. Like in many cases, like you go client side to a large brand, you're probably spending more money in total than, your entire prior agency had in their entire portfolio book of business. But yet they get all like, sometimes like passive aggressive mousy and like will complain about it. But yet like they're not actively managing the partners to like make them help them. Like you do the proverbial aggressive play on a vendor a couple of times and they're coming in being overly aggressive on theirs. And it's like, all right, I know you got to sell yourself a little bit. I get it. But what I really need from you right now is, and sometimes I feel like that's just a missing piece. And then the agency side, like I said, all too often they take it to the other extreme, right? But there's something to be said there that I think there is a way, because of course they're going to do that. They're salespeople, but that doesn't mean you have to just sit back and take it. Like you took a meeting with them. That doesn't mean you should just sit back and let them like, puke all over you, whatever they want, right? Willie Loman's at the door trying to throw dirt in your carpet and you don't want to vacuum. Tell him you don't want to vacuum. Shut the door in his face, right?
Well,
like,
I'll say, Rob,
do it.
when I was, Anna, to your point, like when I was selling DSP technology, I found that being able to give a really quick rundown of, what the landscape is, strengths and weaknesses of all the different platforms, if you can do that, you're ahead of so many, of your peers, right? And that's taking it back to education. Like that's the basic education that I think a lot of, salespeople should be able to give in the sales process. So I think we'll probably wrap it up here. If you have any last minute questions, pop them into the chat. We can, do them in the last minute or two here. We did have one question about, is WorkReduce going to be consolidating a list of all the webinars and trainings that are out there? I don't currently have plans to do that or necessarily the bandwidth at the moment, but I love that idea. That's maybe a startup for somebody who is
If you
looking
do it,
for
please share with the rest of us.
a project.
Yeah.
If I get my act or our act together to do it, I will let you know. I will plug though one other thing. We are launching a resource for people who have been affected during the COVID-19 crisis here. It's called Minimum Viable List. We'll be broadcasting this out pretty widely, but this is a preview to everyone on this call who hasn't heard about it yet. But it's just a free way to get your name out there as somebody who is a media buyer, media analytics specialist, or a front-end developer out in front of our clients, other people who are just out there searching for it. So minimumviablelist.com. Check that out. And we'll wrap this up by thanking all of our amazing panelists. This has been really great to have you guys. Great to see all of your faces on here. And we had great, I think, participation and attendance on this. So we're going to keep doing these and look forward to the next one. And hope everybody stays safe out there and healthy and well employed.
Right on. Rock on.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.